Hey, I'm Coop, and this is the Run a Profitable Gym podcast. Today, I'm talking with Joey Mure from Wealth Without Wall Street. A lot of people who listen to this podcast also listen to the Wealth Without Wall Street podcast, and so it's a real honor to have Joey on the show. Today, we're going to be talking about the number one thing that I think gym owners really need to be thinking about more, and that is, how are they ever going to retire? How are they going to achieve financial freedom? Most of us, when we start a gym, we're happy to have bought ourselves a job that we really love, and we feel guilty for thinking beyond that. Like, what if this could pay me as much as I need and a little bit more? What if it could pay me enough to pay for my retirement? What if I could actually become wealthy doing this? It seems like too much to ask because we love our job so much. We're dedicated to service, but yet we also know that we have to take care of our families and take care of ourselves long term. Today, we're going to be talking with Joey about exactly how you would go about doing that. And I'm going to be sharing some tips from my book, Millionaire Gym Owner 2. Joey, welcome to Run a Profitable Gym.
Oh man, so glad to be on today.
Yeah, anybody who, for them who haven't heard your podcast, and, I think the majority of listeners to this podcast also listen to Wealth Without Wall Street, but can you just maybe share a little bit of the mission of Wealth Without Wall Street?
And Chris, we exist to help people who want to become financially free get there faster. And we do that through helping people to figure out how to set up their own personal cash flow system, to invest in passive income assets and become a better investor. Once you can do that, man, freedom is on the other side.
That's awesome. So the listeners to this podcast are all entrepreneurs. Everybody understands, basically it's up to them to be able to create wealth, create a business. But we all love our jobs. I mean, I think we might be unique in that everybody that owns a gym loves their job. And sometimes we feel a little bit guilty about wanting more. We even feel a little bit guilty about talking about that P word, profit. Joey, can you put this in context for us? Why do we need to start caring about this stuff almost from the day we open our gym?
Well, I think it boils down to, first of all, you have to want it. So to your point, Chris, I mean, there's some people that are making enough in their gym to where it's paying for their lifestyle. They enjoy the time that they're giving to it. It's not too much. It's not too little. It's just that kind of that right place. But I don't necessarily think that person has to begin thinking about financial freedom. The only reason that I would say is as you grow. So we've talked to tons and tons of your students, and they are getting better every single year. So the profit has to go somewhere. And at that point, then it becomes, okay, well, if I'm going to continue to expand and I'm going to continue to grow and level up myself, my money has to level up, right? And also think about this. If what I'm doing today is not sustainable forever, then my money has to start making its own. It has to go to work too. I can go to work today, but there may be something down the road that prevents me from being able to work at the same level or in the same intensity. And my money has to be working just as hard as me to be able to help offset that. So there's either a defensive or an offensive way that I think people need to start thinking about this subject.
I think for me, it was more the defensive, okay, I'm making just enough, we're scraping by, but I can't keep doing this until I'm 80 years old. And so I need to start making a plan now. And when I started looking around at that point, and this was 2008, I really couldn't figure it out. And so I started with Rich Dad, Poor Dad. But what we're going to be talking about today are a bunch of different options that really didn't exist for me back then, or I didn't know about them. And that's why I want to present them to gym owners now so that they can start thinking about this stuff before it's 10 years after they should be.
Oh, I love that. And I love the fact that you are recognizing, I mean, like most entrepreneurs, a lot of the Wall Street type of products, or even in your neck of the woods, the Bay Street products that are out there, they don't line up with entrepreneurs, right? Because they require you to put money into them and not touch them until you're in your 60s or 70s. And it's like, well, wait a minute, I'm used to cash flow today. I'm used to putting money in, effort in, and getting more money back, right, into my business. Well, what other things could I be doing with my money outside of my business that could give me that same level of profit, or that same level of immediate cash flow? Because that's what pays the bills, right? It's not hope and deferring. It's today. How do I get cash flow today?
Okay. And we're going to get into those specifically. There's one more category of gym owner that I want to make sure that we address here. And these are the people whose gym are profitable, but they're leaving too much money in their business because they don't really know what else to do with it. And so they're subjecting themselves to overtaxation. Let's face it, like if it's in the business, I'm going to be shopping on the Rogue Barbell website with it. It's kind of burning a hole in my pocket. What should these people be doing with their money? And we're gonna address this. But first, Joey, like, what are the different options that are available to us?
Well, I'll tell you this, you just gave me the bit of bait that most people just jump on and they just want to tell you all the cool things that they're investing in. And I want to get to that, but I want to back up 1 second and answer your question two ways. The first is, what does that gym owner do that's got money just built into their business that's burning a hole in their pocket? One, they have to invest in themselves to become a better investor. Because to your point, the reason why we leave so much money in our businesses is there's lots of different reasons, but one of them in particular is, to your point, I don't know what else to do with it. It seems risky to start investing in something else. And I love what you shared with me about your story on another time we talked, is you just immediately said, what do I know? And I bought the building that my gym was in so that I could have that as a recurring revenue stream. Again, that's a great application for that person you're talking about, is start with something that you know, but don't stop there, right? Start investing in coaching. Why do people see benefits from your program? Because they stopped and they said, I don't know everything that there is about running a profitable gym. And so I'm going to invest in myself by taking this on. And what happens? Results. Well, the same is true with becoming an investor. Nobody goes out and becomes a land investor overnight where they're flipping and making 72% yield on every property that they buy and sell. But it can be done very simply if you just stop and invest in yourself. And then the second way I was answering this question is, you say, what all places can people invest in? Well, the first thing is you have to know what sort of an investor you are. And so one of the things that we learned, this is Russ and I, after building 50,000 a month in passive income, we looked backwards and we said, okay, what did we do well? What did we not do well? How can we compress time for other people so that they can get to this result a lot faster? And one of them was we started to recognize there's certain investments that line up with our personality that may not resonate with you, Chris. They may not resonate with that next gym owner who's listening. But there's some things that would really resonate well with you or that gym owner that don't with us. And it's the reason, like, God's created us to see the world differently. He's given us resources. He's given us experiences. And those things have to be factored into what you invest in. When most people just chase, what's the ROI? What's the investment that I'm going to put it in that's going to give me the most money back? And they're not considering that they are more important than the investment itself. Because if you disagree or you misalign, it will actually take years off of your financial freedom journey. And we want to make sure that those align from day one.
You remind me of, my stock advisor is sending me an email every single day saying you need to be buying into Eli Lilly, the makers of Ozempic. And I just cannot do it, So, that's a simple example. But let's talk about where we start, Joey. Like, where does the journey begin?
The first thing I would tell you is what happened for us is a different mindset. And it came into, what does everybody around you in the world, they try to get you to put your money away for a long period of time and hope that it's like this accumulation strategy. Well, if I just take this money now and I put it over here, it gets a little bit of interest. And then I roll that into the next, and it gets a little interest, and it keeps building until quote unquote retirement. And now I can start peeling off dollars off the top and hope it doesn't run out before I die. Right. So first of all, that strategy is flawed in a lot of different ways. But the one I'll just point to is nothing else in your life works that way. Right. You have to have cash flow to pay the bills. So we want to, the difference maker is the way you think about financial freedom has to be when your passive income exceeds your monthly expenses. If you just literally stop and think for a second, the financial world wants you to actually think it's way more complex than that. Oh, you're not smart enough. Chris, you should be, thinking about your portfolio analysis. And they throw out all these big words and these big things, diversification and this. And you're like, well, I guess this guy knows what he's doing. He's smarter. He's done schooling for this or that or whatever. But the reality is, if I give you the scorecard, and how many people, gym owners, we're competitive, right? Like you want to get in there. If I can have the score, I know how to win. Well, here, I'm giving you the score. If your passive income, the things that your money goes to work for that comes back to you in cash flow, produces more than what your monthly expenses are every month, you are completely free, right? Think about that. If I have $10,000 a month coming in passive income, and I have $9,000 a month in monthly expenses, mortgage, credit cards, taxes, whatever the case is, I do not have to show up on anybody else's schedule tomorrow. I only look at my calendar and I decide what goes on it. Your gym would not require you to be present if it was passively coming in and your expenses were less than it was. This is the freedom score. And if we can do that, that's a mindset shift, but it's also a simplicity thing, because now I can start making decisions with what my money's doing to play into that scorecard. So no longer is someone saying, hey, man, you put money into this real estate deal and, in 10 years, it may return, $100,000 more. Well, okay. Does that produce a passive income for me today? No. Does it reduce a monthly expense? No. I'm out. I'm not doing that deal. I don't care how cool it may sound or I might get some status from it or whatever. I'm keeping score differently so I can make decisions differently.
That makes sense. And honestly, Joey, having parents who are retired, I can see this mindset of scarcity that's present from this way of thinking. They start at age 20, they're buying mutual funds and stocks according to their financial person. After they've retired, they're, very, very, very careful with the money because they don't want to draw down too much. And then they wind up passing away with a whole bunch of money left over. It makes no sense. What you've just said makes a ton of sense. I mean, when your passive income exceeds your expenses, then you're free. Makes sense. And I think entrepreneurs have already taken a massive first step toward that.
Oh, there's no doubt. Your business could be the greatest asset that becomes passive for you. I mean, you've already put the blood, sweat, and tears into it. It didn't even potentially take a lot of cash to get started, but it took a lot of blood. You put a lot of sweat equity into that deal. But as you level up, like within your course and your programs, Chris, the people we're talking to, they've leveled up. Right? They didn't start, they're not where they started with you. And now they've become to a point where they're starting to think way differently about, man, maybe there's key people I could put into place in my gym that would allow me to open up a second or third gym. And now I can no longer be the guy that's greeting you at the door, who's selling you your membership, who's doing personal training, who's doing all the things. You're no longer the technician, you're the business owner. And the business owner, as Robert Kiyosaki, you pointed him out earlier, he talks about that's where the wealth is built, is in the third and fourth quadrants, right? The business owner and the investor quadrant, not the employee or the self-employed. We want to get to that B quadrant. And your program is getting people to that point. So now their biggest asset is passive. And that's huge, but they can't end there, because if you're creating more and more profit, it's got to go somewhere. And that's where you have to become that investor.
That's awesome, man. Okay, Joey, we're dying to know where it should go.
Well, if you're with me so far, you're like, okay, I'm with you. Wealth without Wall Street. I don't want someone else. I don't want to abdicate that to somebody else. I'm smart enough. I can do this. Then it's like, man, get your investor DNA and then start to filter down to one of these. Okay. So one of my favorite things for people is something that we started in 2020 is the land flipping or land investment business. Okay. Where we go out and this is our team. We hired a team that does this. but they go out and they buy raw pieces of real estate from owners that are absentee. So for instance, I may be buying a piece of property in Texas, but the owner is in Nebraska. Okay. They don't live there. They don't live nearby. They may have inherited it and they're presently behind on their taxes. So what does that tell me? It tells me they're not present and they really don't care that much because the taxes are behind or they can't afford it. So that's like the perfect opportunity. It's like, Chris, if I walked up to you at your house and I looked in your garage and I said, man, how much would you take for that weed eater over there? And you're like, I haven't even touched that weed eater in 10 years. It's just been hanging there because I don't do anything with it. I'd be like, I'll give you $10. You're like, sold. Well, that thing may be worth $100, but you don't care at that point because you're like, I'm not motivated. I'm not interested. That's just like the sellers of the land that we buy. They'll sell it to us for 20 to 30 cents on the dollar because they kind of meet that criteria. Well, then our team takes that property, they put it on land.com, they put it on Landmodo, they put it on all these Facebook Marketplace, Craigslist, and they list it for sale on terms. Okay, so give you an example. I buy a piece of property for $2,000 and I sell it for $10,000 on terms, which is, $1,000 a month, or excuse me, $100 a month for 100 months or whatever the case. Like we just do the math, we own or finance it. So it makes it very possible for that person to then buy the property. There's very little, barrier to entry. But now we've, like I said, 5x'd our investment because we've made this whole transaction happen. We do that over and over and over. We build a massive loan portfolio, and that one business right now is yielding almost $35,000 a month. So I'm a big fan of land flipping if that interests people. They want to go even more passive, Chris, there's all sorts of syndications, right? Things like apartment complexes that you can get into syndications with other investors and buy into, be hands off, and then they pay you cash flow for the use of your money. Those are applicable in apartments, mobile home parks, storage units, like all sorts of real estate syndications exist. And we've got our hands in some of those. I would say most of the things that we get interested in are business related because, and I think most entrepreneurs are with us on that because they like to be in an advisory role because they take some of the experience they've had in this one business, they can apply it to another as long as they're not the operator, the technician involved.
So how does that work, Joey? Can you give us an example of that last one?
Yeah. So we started a short-term rental business in 2020 as well. And what that was is we installed an operator and we said, hey, this is the type of model that we want to do. Go out and find this type of unit. We're going to, in our case, we rented apartments or homes, and then we turned around and furnished them and then put them on Airbnb or VRBO. And we made the arbitrage, the difference between the rental payment and what we could get on a short-term, like nightly basis. And that was paying us almost $200,000 a year at its peak. And then we sold that business once we had like 27 units to our operator a little over a year ago. But that to me was something we really enjoyed because we were just the owner. We had an operator that was doing all the day-to-day. And so we could be hands off, but still be involved. And so that's another example of people from our community. They're doing stuff like that as well.
Let's talk about bridging that gap the first time. When I read Rich Dad, Poor Dad, I realized, okay, Chris, you should buy a building. The loan payment's going to be about what you're paying in rent anyway. But still, I had to have this down payment. And it took me about 2.5 years to save up. I think I had to have $70,000 to get the building going. Are there like smaller gaps that people can cross, or are there easier ways to start than that?
In terms of just rather than having a large down payment, is that what you're asking?
Yeah, or I've got $10,000 or I've got $20,000. How do I get started? What's the first thing I should look at?
Oh man, well again, I hate to be like that guy I'm not trying to be ambiguous, but the type of person is going to dictate this. But we have people for instance, they may get into that land business as a way to build capital because you can get into properties for, $500 to $1,000 and then turn them into 4 times that in terms of revenue. That's a low barrier of entry to get into. We have other people. I just recently bought 3 content websites that are affiliate branding kind of like websites. They were already making money. I just bought them and then essentially swapped out the bank account behind it and then started to look for ways to improve it. And, just as an example, one of them I bought was 16,000 and it has yielded almost 10,000 in terms of return within the first 11 months. That to me is a really high rate of return. It's very hands off. There's multiple people you can hire to run those. And like I said, low barrier of entry in terms of the amount required upfront to get into. The other thing I would say is sometimes it's just private loans. One time I did a private loan to somebody who had a car that was worth about $20,000 and he just needed a short-term loan. And it was only 10 grand he wanted. Well, I used to be in the mortgage business and I looked at the collateral and I was like, hey, it's a nice car. It's worth a lot more than what he wants to lend. I can be added to the insurance of his car so that if it got totaled, I get paid. And that thing yielded me almost 27% over the course of a year. Now, because I used my infinite banking system, which, I know, Chris, you and I have talked about that before, it actually yielded a lot more return because I used leverage. But that was one of my favorite things I ever did. It was only a $10,000 entry to get involved. And people are always looking for capital.
Okay. So, to recap, I think one of the most important points here is that you're taking the cash that you have and you're investing it in something that's going to keep paying you for a very long time. And that's the principle that I didn't understand years ago. But, what Joey's talking about with these websites, et cetera, and the loans is they're going to wind up paying him back way more than his initial investment. I think when people watch these home reno or flip shows, they think, okay, well, I'm going to put $100,000 into this rundown house. I'm going to fix it, which I don't know how to do. And then I'm going to sell it for way more, which I don't know how to do. And, but that's not it, right? So maybe just kind of touch on how a syndication works, and then we're going to come to infinite banking after that.
Sure. So syndications are very hands-off. And think about it as, let's say I'm buying an apartment complex and there's a group of us investors. There's, first of all, a group that operates the investment. They know how to find the properties that need a little bit of work. They already have cash flow involved, but they see an opportunity to force improvement to that property. Okay. So an example might be, hey, this is a 100-unit apartment complex and it hasn't been updated or the units haven't been renovated. So the average rent is $600 a month for each one of these units. But if I can renovate them over a period of the next 24 months, I can force the rents to go from $600 to $800 a month. Well, the way an apartment complex works is it's valued off of its net operating income, the amount of income that it's producing. So if I can force it from 600 to 800 per unit, that just increased the valuation of that property by a significant amount. And so then I could sell that property 2, 3, 4 years later for a massive return, a massive profit. Well, in a good syndication, and I will tell you, make sure you do your due diligence, because that's the hard part about syndications. Do your due diligence on the front end, but in a good one, you're able to get cash flow today, every single month, and a large equity percent at the end. So think about it as in a business, you are building it and you're getting cash flow today, but you decide to sell it, let's say 5 years from now, all of a sudden that value has gone like this and you get a big chunk at the end. That's how a syndication that's run properly really helps you to be hands off, but to make sure you're getting the passive income.
Where do people find these syndications, and like what is the barrier to entry? Is it 50,000, 100,000, 10,000?
Yeah, I would say that's some of the challenges is, number one, You got to find the right operators, people who have a long track record. This comes from networking. It comes from being in masterminds of people who are already doing this. Those are things that I would say are like the barrier of entry. The second is you have to be an accredited investor, which in the US means that you make 200,000 or more per year on your own, or 300,000 as a joint, like you and your wife or you and your spouse make more than 300,000 a year. And so there's income restrictions, and typically there's a 50 to 100,000 minimum before they would allow you to be a part of that partnership. So those are the challenges with syndications.
Okay, let's talk about infinite banking. And the timing on this is amazing, because I was literally talking to my 17-year-old last night, and I'm like, Joey Mure is coming on the podcast tomorrow. We're going to be talking about infinite banking. Well, what's that? So me trying to explain infinite banking to a 17-year-old, I was like, maybe you should just listen to the Wealth Without Wall Street podcast. But what I'm hoping is that you can explain it so that my 17-year-old would understand it after listening to this show.
Well, I will. That's a challenge in and of itself, because I have a 16-year-old and an 18-year-old, and man, it has been a challenge. So I'm with you. My heart goes out. Here's what I'll tell you. Infinite banking is a lot. There's a lot of the words sound difficult, but what I'll simplify it to is when you're making profit in your gym, the money has to go somewhere. Okay, it can go into checking or savings. Those are like the only options that we're going to store the money in. Now, this is not an investment, because investments are the things we've already talked about. Your business, syndications, we have a vending business, there's a land business. Those are the investments, but the cash has to be stored somewhere before it goes into those investments, right? So here's what we decided after reading the book, Become Your Own Banker 15 years ago, is we want the place that we store our money to be the most, like the best characteristics that we could have for our money. And the author of that book, Nelson Nash, who is one of our personal mentors, we spent 10 years with him before he passed away 3 or 4 years ago. He said, quit thinking about where to store your money like everybody else. He said, think like a bank, become a banker. Well, where do banks store their money? And, if you think about that, you're like, well, banks have the biggest buildings in any city. You go down there, they're the sky rises, right? And you're like, man, they must put money in real estate, because they take your money on deposit and they lend it out, and that's their business model. They make everything in between. But the reality is, what do they then do with their profit? Well, they put it not in just real estate. That is one place. But the other place that they put money in, the safest, they call it tier 1 capital. If you look at their balance sheets, and I would challenge you, go to FDIC.gov or your regulatory agency and look up your bank, and they'll show you their balance sheet. The largest number on their balance sheet is in cash value life insurance. And you're like, wait a minute, you're talking about like whole life insurance? And I'm saying yes, which I worked for Wells Fargo, Chris, for 11 years. And when I was learning this, I went to all the executives of the bank that I worked at here locally in Alabama. And I was like, hey, what do you think about this idea, become your own banker, like putting money into cash value life insurance, into whole life insurance? And not one of them said it was a good place to put money, like zero of the executives I talked to. And then I simultaneously pulled up their balance sheet, Wells Fargo's balance sheet, and they're putting $19 billion into cash value life insurance. And guess what? Those executives were the very people who the bank was insuring to put that kind of money in. So it was mind-blowing, Chris. I was like, wait a minute. The people who are being insured don't even understand that this is where their bank has deemed the safest place to put money. But the reason is they understand one thing. When you put money in as a safety spot to put that money for savings, it has to be liquid, means I can get access to it anytime. It has to be safe, like it's not subject to volatility in the market or otherwise. And it's tax efficient. These policies, these insurance, contracts that people put money into are actually growing tax deferred and available to access tax free for generations. So when I can use this money tax free my whole entire life. And then when I die, I actually leave an inheritance to my family that is also tax free. So there's never a tax on this money. Okay, so that's a huge thing. And then the last thing, this is the key that Nelson unlocked in this Becoming Your Own Banker. When I put money into these policies and properly structured, I can go to the insurance company at any time. And this is great for your gym owners, Chris. They say, you know what, it's time to expand and buy that property that our gym's in. And they don't go to a bank. They go to the insurance company and they say, hey, I've got $100,000 in my life insurance policy. I'd like to borrow money from the insurance company to go put down on this property. And guess what happens? Let's say they needed 70,000 for that down payment. 100,000 is still growing on their behalf in that policy because the insurance company allows them to take a loan against it, like an equity line in your house. The equity still grows, but you now have that money at work. So the ridiculous, unfair advantage about infinite banking is I have money growing in two places at once. I have money growing in my policy and in whatever assets I've chosen to invest in, whether it's my business, whether it's out in a land business, whether it's in a vending machine business, whatever we're doing, which Russ and I have done some crazy stuff, and you could hear it on our podcast, but all of it has been leveraged through these massive number of policies that we've built over the years because of this one concept. And without this concept, we would not be getting invited onto awesome shows like yours to talk about creating $50,000 a month in passive income because we had to put this in place first, and it's made all the difference.
Now it's interesting because, obviously I was talking to my 17-year-old about setting this up for him so that when he's done school and he wants to be an entrepreneur, he'll be borrowing from himself instead of going to the bank, hat in hand. Can I have some money to start this business? And while the rules are slightly different in Canada, they're not dramatically different. It's a great plan. Now, this will sound, people are listening to this while they're driving and they're trying to keep score in their head and stuff, but is there something more concrete that we can give them, Joey? I know your team has made them up a little tool or a landing page or something.
Yeah, I mean, this is something that's interesting to you. We have tons of free resources. We actually have a quiz that will show you how close you are to financial freedom. If you go to wealthwithoutwallstreet.com/Chris Cooper, just keep it really simple, right? wealthwithoutwallstreet.com/Chris Cooper. You get all access to those free resources, and we have connection points with our team, our free community, whatever you're looking for, we have it all listed there.
Yeah. So just to be clear, listeners, this is not an affiliate link that, Joey gives me 25 cents every time you go to this is our genuine offer to help you because I want more gym owners thinking about this next level. When we started talking years ago about gym owners making $100,000 a year, that was more than double the industry average. And a lot of people thought that could never happen for me. But changing that mindset is actually what changes the industry because eventually people start saying, how can that happen for me? And it's going to be the same with wealth. I think to really make our industry grow and flourish and to put more power into the hands of the best gym owners, we need to give them a way to expand their impact, their reach, create better careers, open more locations and stuff. And I really like what Joey and Russ have done here. So if you go to wealthwithoutwallstreet.com/Chris Cooper, thanks for the vanity URL. First, you'll get a little quiz, which I think is super cool. And then you're going to get some free resources, just like you're used to getting from Two Brain.
Yes. Yeah. And we're always happy to help people along their journey, whatever that may look like.
That's great, man. Okay. Well, the Wealth Without Wall Street podcast is a very popular one, especially among our Tinkers. And if, Joey and Russ are actually going to be speaking at Tinker in March when they take a trip down to Nashville area. So we're really excited for that. But in the meantime, if people are really interested in the Wealth Without Wall Street knowledge bank, talking to you, where should they go, Joey?
I would go right to that same page because there's actually there's emails, there's social connections, and our community is a free app that you can connect with other people on the same journey. There's over, I think we're up to like almost 9,000 people who are engaged in this process at various different levels.
Wow.
And so I think just like within Two Brain, you guys are surrounding yourself with other people who are like-minded, who are trying to get to the same goal, and your actual like ability to get to success is dramatically increased when you change your environment. And so that's what we built the community for. So it is totally free to join.
Oh man, that's so great. Thank you, Joey. You know, my favorite thing about Wealth Without Wall Street, other than you and Russ just as humans, that's my favorite. But my second favorite thing is, you know, the help first ethos of we learned this thing ourselves. We want to give it to other people so that they know it too. And that comes through in everything you do. So thanks so much for being that way.
Oh man, it's great to be on a show with like-minded people. So anytime, I really appreciate it.
Thank you.